Ian Mutiso is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and he's here today because he has some clients that he's representing. And these are persons of interest to everybody, including all of us as citizens, but also persons of interest with investigative authorities, because they're investigating over something, one thing or the other. We don't know. We just know that there were some 4 filmmakers who were arrested at one point in the night, and there was a link with the BBC documentary that had just aired a couple of days earlier, called what? Blood Parliament. Now, is that so? Is that not so? Ian is here to take us through it. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning.
Karibu sana.
Thanks so much for having me. It's literally an honor to be on this set.
Literally, yeah?
It's an honor.
You've been watching it from far.
I hope this is the seat below sat on. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, okay. I feel
I'm
soaking the energy. I once was told that in every room you have to act like a sponge. So I hope that whatever ooze that he has, I'm soaking it in.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Jano has the day's quote.
This I do. Today's quote says, "Turn your wounds into wisdom."
Oh wow.
Do you turn your wounds into wisdom?
Yes, actually, this is something that I have started to, just take into in my own tidings. Of course, everybody learns from their own mistakes, bad experiences. Mental health is a big space in the current space, and at this particular point in time, we're in a very murky environment whereby human rights is not something which is being taken as seriously as it ought to be. So these are certain wounds we have to lick and learn from them and turn them into something that we can always be formidable as a shield and things like that. Yeah, so that's a very impeccable quote you have there.
It sounds like it's also what drives you in your practice.
Yes, I think I have a very unique background. I personally went through different challenging times. At one point, I was even equally arrested. LSK came and assisted me at one particular point. And that whole experience of even being an arrested person at that time, it made me realize that we have totally forgotten about the rights of an arrested person. And that's why when we have a president like Faith Odhiambo at the helm, who's also very vigilant and she's outspoken, she's very dedicated, we tend to follow leaders who show us impeccable leadership. And it's one of those things that you just learn from, and you devote your experience, your vocals to just assist those who cannot find justice in a way. So this is my way of giving back. Yeah.
What were you arrested for, if you don't mind?
Unfortunately, it was an experience. Perhaps maybe I wouldn't be able to share in depth details, but I wanted to bring something to light which was happening within the family. I was not very comfortable with the person who was committing this particular offenses, and because of being outspoken, or rather in quote unquote, I was being a snitch about it. The repercussions was that this person used his access to certain people and tried to fix me in a position. So the only option was that being an advocate, LSK decided, you know what, this is one of ours, let's get into it. And they came through, and I'll always be grateful to Eric Theory and a few other senior members from the Law Society for coming through. And I learned a lot from that whole experience. Yeah.
Here you are in the heart of another interesting case.
Stand in the gap for others.
Standing in the gap for others. I think I just want to go back to how you ended up being part of this case and working with these filmmakers. Just take us back to how that interaction came about as we get deeper into the case as it stands as well.
Well, maybe you'll just allow me just to go back all the way to 2024. 2024 was a year that I don't think any Kenyan will ever forget. And more importantly is that the Law Society of Kenya, what they decided to do when the protest started happening was that they formed a group of advocates who would actually just be on the go, where we get a notification of some violation of any rights or where a citizen just raises an alarm. So as advocates, we were brought together by Faith, and anytime there was an incident, she will just send a message to us via WhatsApp group, and we will just show up regardless of the situation. And that's how I started getting involved with the Law Society of Kenya, dealing with abduction matters. And at that time, I'd been assigned to Central Police Station and Kamkunji Police Station. So that's where most of my cases were. Mm-hmm. So now...
You were in the heat of it.
Yeah, I was. And I remember the first few cases that I did, I think it was for Eric Omondi, if I'm not mistaken. And then it started sparking, and it became Boniface Mwangi. Then it became more other Kenyans. It became Took university students. It became so it just kept on increasing. And the good thing is that the Law Society has always maintained this core group of advocates. So regardless, whenever something happens, we are always there. That's why LSK is just very quick to appear whenever something happens. Now, coming back to these 4 filmmakers, it was about 2nd of May around 10:30. I get a call from one of my clients.
AM, PM?
PM. And I get a call from the Mwangis, and one of the Mwangis tells me that James Smart needs some legal assistance. So equally, I get the number for James Smart, reach out to him. He gives me the breakdown of where this was happening to these 4 individuals. At that time, he had only 3 names, I think. And he tells me, you need to look for these guys. Then what usually happens is that you just get the last location of where these people are.
Right.
So equally, right, I think from this whole experience since 2024, what has happened is that I've gotten a chance to know almost every police officer within Nairobi. So it's very easy for me to trace people. So one of the first people I reached out to was the Nairobi Regional Commander, Seda. And then I reached out to the Commander Pangani Police Station. And at this particular point, nobody's saying where these people are.
Are they acknowledging that?
They're not acknowledging at that particular time, but I made sure. Yeah. So the idea is that you just have names. You need to find these people where they are. And I think what has happened is that everybody's dealing with some form of trauma or PTSD. When somebody misses in Kenya right now for a few hours, it's a concern.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And then what happens is that we know these guys are involved with some filmmaking. They're in their own right, their form of activity using their own artistic insights. So the idea also was that one of these filmmakers had an appointment with James. So it sparked that interest, So after a couple of minutes, that's when now they start saying, oh, but 2 of these guys, they're in Pangani. After being there for almost 1 hour.
Wow.
Yeah. So fortunately, two of them in Pangani. So the question is, where are the other 2? But since I'm there, let me first find out how these 2 are, and then in good state. So that's how the whole thing began. And from there, was able to get some insights on why they're being detained there. Managed to sneak to see the OB, realize it's false publication. And then from there, I also managed to know that the other 2 are in Muthaiga. So after I made sure these guys are safe, dashed to Muthaiga. Now this is like around 1 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. So that's how I got involved in this. Yeah.
I just want to name them by name because also it's important just to recognize them. It's Nicholas Wambogo Gishuki, Chris Omai, Brian Adagala, and Mark Denver Karubio.
Yeah.
The 4 of them, what do they do for a living?
So for Mark Denver and Brian Adagala, those are filmmakers, and their specialties in cinematography.
What's that?
This is basically that's just basically capturing moments, doing storytelling. They have done some amazing visual arts. They documented some of the things that occurred on the D-Day, June 25th, 2024. And they also are close allies of Boniface Mange and Semo Kweli. So their artworks are mainly on capturing the storytelling aspects of how human rights violations, corruption, things like that. And also something else, Brian Adegala also does video shooting for events. He did my own wedding. So yeah, so those two are videographers. And when it comes to Nicholas, is also a storyteller in his own right, also cinematography. And also for Christopher, him is also a music producer. So these are guys who are deeply involved in artistic development, digital rights, and things like that.
Do they work together? Like, do they operate from the same place? Do they own a company together? How are they linked?
Share an office space?
Yes. So for Brian and Mark Denver and Nicholas, these guys, they tend to work closely together. As a matter of fact, Nicholas was not meant to be in Karen at that time. It's just that he had an activity within Karen, decided, let me go visit my boys. My boys. Yeah. Just the way Kenyans are, So he ended up just being caught in the middle of it. But it's way interesting when looking at the CCTV footage of how these guys were arrested. It's equally more interesting on that aspect. And for Christopher, is also somebody who was now arrested in his own home, brought all the way to Karen. So then they were bundled together. Yeah.
Wait, so Chris was arrested first?
Chris was arrested first in his own home in Kahawa.
Turned to Katembe.
Yeah, turned to Katembe. Taken all the way to Karen.
You say hi to your friends.
Yeah, taken all the way to Karen. Then
what specific charges, if any, were being
So
brought against
just before we go to the charges, I want to know what the procedure for arrest is in Kenya, because we often say the word arrested, but I don't think some of these things are arrests.
Yeah.
So how should an arrest happen, and did it happen in that way for Nicholas, for Chris, for Brian, and of course for Mark Denver?
And I think this is one of the reasons why I'm so vexed by the state and the DCI per se. Ordinarily, the procedure for arrest is well articulated in Article 49 of the Constitution, right? So take, for example, when an officer from DCI or rather National Police Service wants to effect an arrest, one of the few things that they need is to have probable cause. Okay, this is what informs them that indeed they have some form of evidence that actually now mandates them to actually come and effect an arrest. Now, when they come to you, one of the few things they're supposed to do, they're not supposed to be covering their face, okay? They're supposed to have a thing as some form of documentation, all right? And then they're supposed to come and say, hey, listen, we are investigating you for A, B, C, and D, and we are going to put you under arrest because of A, B, C, and D, okay? Once they do that, they read for you, they do something called memorandarize you. This is basically informing you of your rights as an arrested person. You have the right to counsel, and you know what? Stay silent. That's your own right. Anything you say,
right?
No, but it is
supposed to.
Yeah.
It is.
In Kenya.
There is a guideline from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution on what they're supposed to do, because anything you say can be used against you in a court of law.
Right.
That is something that does exist. And funny thing enough, the way
what do we call them in Kenya? So in the movies, you call them the Miranda rights.
Yes.
In the States. Are they
same thing here. Same thing here.
Even here?
Yes. Okay. As a matter of fact, there is a specific way you're supposed to say it.
Is it the same way? Like you have the right to
remain
silent?
Yes.
You have the right to
an
attorney?
These are not things which are just in the movie. It's good that people tend to watch movies and, experience all of it. But this is something that you're supposed to be informed on.
On a scale of 1 to 10, does it happen often? Do the arrests happen often
You were
actually in
arrested.
Kenya?
Yeah.
Mine was very unique, as a matter of fact. My experience was not only poor, but it's one of the reasons why I'm so dedicated about this arrested thing. All right? Because at the end of the day, if you want to, we have this culture whereby anybody who bears power or some form of relevance to authority, they feel like they're above the law.
Yeah.
And they can do whatever. So me, I'm that type of a I'm rebellious to that type of a thing. Of course, I have respect to authority. I'm a Christian. I practice that, and we expect also to respect the authority. But at the same time, there's a form of rebellion, especially where authority is poor. I'll rebel against that. Okay? It's the same thing we saw with somebody going to the, filing a petition against the DCJ, because whatever power that she had, she did not exercise it according to the law. So that's a form of rebellion. All right? So ideally, that aspect of being informed and being read your rights, it's something which is mandated and is expected by the ODPP. The moment you're arrested and an officer does not do that, I can quash that particular arrest.
I was just about to ask, is that grounds for dismissal?
Yes, yes, there are grounds. The fact that an officer can come to wherever you are and say that they're just taking you, they're detaining you without cause. They do not have probable cause. And the funny thing is that from the video evidence that I have access to and I was able to share to the courts, I could be able to tell that the officer who were effecting the arrest against my clients, they not only did they merenderized them, but they did not inform them of the reason why they're being arrested. You can tell they're shooting at some form of cause, but they're not hitting the target. They're saying they've come here, they're now saying that you guys do not have license. Yet, at the end of the day, there should be a probable cause and why they were there.
In the first place.
My clients are asking them, why are you arresting us? Why do you intend to detain us? They're not saying anything. They're starting to beat the bush. My clients are asking, I want to get in touch with our advocate. They're not be given that opportunity. Then all of a sudden, they're seizing their gadgets. Wow. Yeah, that's why I think at this particular environment, I find that if the LSK did not mandate me to take up on this matter, I kid you not, we'll have more journalists who are being targeted on this whole thing. I really believe that. And what happened the day before yesterday was that we had the Mukuru Justice Center being summoned to DCI for basically trying to do civic education on showing the same piece of documentary and also just informing people exactly what it was all about. If the LSK did not show up at that time, I kid you not, those guys will also be facing the same thing. So I'm just keeping these guys on their toes.
Yeah, and I think when they're publicized, I think what's important that's happened with what you and LSK do is that we learn about it. And I think when it's that visible, it's very hard to mess around with it. But I'm just wondering, is it national security, criminal defamation? Like, what is the common line as to why journalists and activists are being arrested? I know it may sound like a strange question, but I'm just trying to be like, he came with files.
I came with evidence. I came with evidence.
I like that you're holding it like photo op.
All right, sorry.
And you can be able to just read through all of them. You have copies.
Right.
One of the few things that once my clients were illegally arrested and detained, one of the few things is that when we started having a lot of attention to this, the pressure from LSK, Faith Odhiambo, all these guys, then you have the media houses, international community. These guys started now walking back, all right, saying, okay, now we have to try and do things by the book, all right? So it's one of the reasons why these guys were released on free bond, okay? Fine, well and good. They're back home, but their rights have already been violated at that particular point. The next thing for them to do is that because now they went ahead and detained gadgets without a proper court order, they went ahead and filed something called a miscellaneous application for search warrant. This is basically, they should have done it way before when they had communicated the probable cause, okay? Now, the funny thing is that I have brought the miscellaneous application here. This miscellaneous application details exactly why they were seeking the search warrants, okay? And they've been denying all through that we're not investigating or interested in this case because of the BBC documentary. But when they filed the documents, everything BBC is included over there. And
in
it's
the
false.
application to search?
Yes, to search.
The gadgets.
The gadgets. And
so what do they say about that?
They say that they're collaborators with the owners and users of the BBC handles that did the publication of this particular documentary. Okay.
They're collaborators with the owners and users of the handles.
Yes. who did the publication of the BBC documentary.
Okay.
Okay. We're referring now to the Blood Parliament. Now, what's even more interesting is they're not saying exactly what is the false publication. And what's, when you say a certain publication is false, you also have to identify what part of that publication is false.
And the falsehood.
Yes. And then something else they're saying, they're highlighting this publication is defamatory. One of the few things you have to realize is that criminal defamatory was repealed from the Penal Code, okay? Yeah. So that's why the kicker, the Cybercrimes Act, came into force, this Section 23. And this is one of the few classes that the government tends to misuse a lot. I have about 4 matters through the LSK that I'm dealing in and for such nature.
Right.
Okay? And as far as this false publication is concerned, they're also stating that it's painting the state organs in bad light. All right? Yes, the application is there.
It's
there. You can easily read through it.
Evidence.
Yes, and this is why it's very important for me to not only get to be in front of such opportunities, but also to be able to call out the investigative unit, the serious crimes unit. If you're going to say something is false publication, can you specify what area? And then if you're saying that it's painting a specific constitutional office in bad light, who is it?
Right.
Okay. It tells me there's an interested person there. Who's pushing this?
Would we not start with ascertaining that the publication is false? I'm trying to just think. If you're prosecuting people for making false publications, you have to ascertain that the publication is false, right? Would that not be step 1?
That will be step 1.
Okay.
Now that's where you build probable cause.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But that was not...
Up to now, I don't know.
What publication?
My clients have not been charged. Okay, I had to go to court to file a miscellaneous application to get them anticipatory bail, so then they can go on about their life. But they can still move on with their lives. They feel that there's something hanging on their heads. That's how you cannot. The right to liberty, people take it for granted. But when somebody locks you in your own space and you can't do anything, that's how you come to realize how important that right is. As much as they're moving around, they don't feel like they're still having that liberty to do their business. They don't have their gadgets. They can't earn.
Right. We have just a minute before the break. I just want to get something. Not a legal mind by any means, but I do wonder, could it be possible that the state knew that this is a frivolous charge, it's going to go nowhere, it's going to be quashed, but the idea was to send a message?
To intimidate.
I don't want to be prejudicial in that nature, but I'll call it a duck because I see it like a duck.
And it walks like a duck.
Yeah, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it is probably a duck, or somebody sounding like a duck. But nonetheless, the application as it is just tells me that there is a targeted operation towards people who not only documented this thing, but also, more importantly, anybody who was involved in the making of this documentary. They're probably they're persons of interest. And that is a fact. The thing is, the government, perhaps maybe they're testing the waters to see what's going to happen.
Right.
But at the same time, they're not telling us exactly what is false.
Okay.
Did the court grant this miscellaneous application?
Yes, and that's something that also I'll want to discuss much later on.
Yeah. Because Mwangi is asking, how did the court grant the orders sought by police through the miscellaneous application?
Yeah.
He says, still, Mark the One says, Kenyan police to read Miranda rights for you. Too much. Ian Mutiso is an advocate of the High Court. He is representing the 4 gentlemen who were arrested. And there's a connection here, officially, semi-officially, legally, semi-legally, with what they do for a living, which is they are filmmakers, they're cinematographers. And then there's the BBC documentary Blood Parliament. Nicholas Wambogo, Chris Wamai, Brian Adagala, Mark Denver, Carobio. They are the clients and their advocates here. We are trying to learn and to understand. Also, it's for us to learn our rights. We'll be back shortly after this break.
100. And as you saw, I got in a legal quagmire as I was doing the What's Up Nation. I got in a I got in an interesting quagmire. But just before we get back into the interview, there's a clip of you, Ian, speaking to the press after the release of the suspects from Muthaiga police station. Let's have a look and see what was happening on that day and what you had to say.
And from the perusal of the OB, it seems that they were likely going to be charged with the publication of false information. We're yet to know the particulars on why these charges do exist. But from further insight into why they've been taken, it seems they're being targeted for the publication of the Blood Parliament documentary, which was aired by BBC. And at this particular juncture, it was a very concerning because, as from my knowledge, I did not get to even have a miscellaneous quite a copy of the application on why their gadgets and why their offices were raided and why their equipment had been taken. That is something that I'll be following up with the DCI to get all those particulars, and I'll be sharing them with the LSK leadership to also do the full representation.
That was after their arrest and their release, and you had just gotten an idea of the particulars of the case, glimpse of the OB and everything. But I just wanted to start from just a basic thing. You said, you suspect they're being arrested, for making false publications. What's a false publication? Well,
under the Act, in this regard, is the Section 23 of the Cyber Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. False publication is anything that is deemed to be, on the face of it, libel or slander that is involved in misinformation, and in other aspects, it's in nature, quote unquote, false in essence. And ideally, if it's not truth, or if it's not justifiable, or if it's not done under the doctrine of protection of laws, that is deemed to be false publication. So in this specific case, what is being deemed as false publication is the BBC Blood Parliament, but there is no specific into what is false in that documentary. Is it the names of the people? Is it the fact that there are people who were killed on that particular day? Is it the fact, what is false about it? And that's why I was very keen to know the particulars of it. And up to date, as I'm sitting here, I don't know what is false publication as far as this documentary is concerned.
Can I ask a follow-up question from what Mariam has asked, which is are there any existing laws that either limit or criminalize or limit anything that's potentially or politically sensitive, the publication of anything that's politically sensitive? Any existing laws that speak to that?
So this is a very interesting thing, because it's what most of these things borderline the issue of defamation. And because we don't have clear defining rules on criminal defamation, the Section 23 now, that's where it comes in. So when we have to take each particular case on its own merits, because there are certain things, like I'll take for example, recently when there was a session in Parliament, a few politicians, the likes of KJ and whoever, they made some statements on the floor, all right? When a politician makes statements on the floor, they cannot be sued because of those statements, all right? Those are protected statements that they do make there, right? Now, when we come into matters, when journalists are doing their own investigation and they do some news publication, there are things which are of public interest. This matter of Blood Parliament is a matter of public interest. You cannot be gagged based on those particular issues, all right? The way gag orders tend to work is that they have not only to be specific in nature, but also that at the time of the gag order, there needs to be some form of the reasons on why that gag order needs to exist. If the gag order is not there, you're likely going to incite violence, hate speech, or something of that nature. Or in other essence, because these are weighty issues before the court, you cannot go and deliberate on those particular issues. But as it stands here, whatever issue that is before the court is to actually find out whether these people are going to be charged with this particular frivolous attempts, or rather, I don't know even what to call it as it is right now. So that's how I like to look at it. Yeah.
But then there would be areas where, for security purposes, you're not allowed to publicize some information, right?
Yes, yes.
And what areas would those be?
So if you look at the, so things like are in the domain of the national security, the likes of the NIS and things like that. There are certain things that are deemed to be of on the interest of the national security, and they will you are not allowed to basically go and discuss. Take, for example, the CS of Interior or anybody within that secretariat that involves in, having meetings on matters of national security. They cannot be able to go and share the particulars of whatever is facing the country per se. So those particular information then cannot go and discuss them on public lines. But at the same time, anything that is on the face of it that is within the public knowledge, you cannot be deemed to not go and discuss that. So even if the government goes and try how much, I kid you not, there is no court of law that is going to give a gag on this issue for bad parliament. Yeah.
So when the application here, the miscellaneous application to go through the gadgets of these 4 filmmakers, what had been taken by police, when they were presenting it before court, what counter argument did you give?
So when these miscellaneous applications are usually brought to court, it's usually done by something called ex parte. That means it's one-on-one. Yes, it's one-on-one. So I wasn't purview when the application was being done, because if I was present, I would have been able to refute those particular application. And that's
who are the 2 parties, just for us.
So in this particular application, it was filed through this DCI, the Serious Crime Unit, by a particular officer known as Nixon Kenywa. Now,
so Nixon and the judge.
Yeah. So within the DCI, there's a legal directorate there. So there's an advocate who does the application on their behalf. This application now, this officer, because he swears a supporting affidavit stating that we're investigating this issue because of A, B, C, and D, the particulars are there. They go to court before a magistrate and they argue their application either in open court or they'll file the application, the judge goes and reads it through. Okay? The problem that I have with this particular application, it was brought after the fact. They went ahead, seized the gadgets. The consent on detaining these things was obtained under duress. My clients did not consent to it. And the application was done on 5th of May. My clients were arrested on the 2nd, all right? Gadgets detained on the 2nd, released on the 3rd of May. So by the time I was doing that interview, this application was non-existent. It was only until I went to the DCA on Monday with LSK, then our time was being wasted there. We actually went and lounged at some room over there. No information is being given and things like that. So I got to have this on the 7th in the morning when I was in court trying to argue another application for anticipatory bail. Then that's when I was served with this. Yeah. So in essence, it's being done by a government official, the DCI, with just the ODPP and the judge in court.
Right. Yeah. And it's been granted?
Yes, it has been granted. And I have another application for review of these orders, because when looking at the application as it is, there are certain things which are not disclosed before the court. So some of the things that should have been disclosed in court is that these gadgets had been detained at a specific time, all right? We do not have particulars on why they should be under investigation. So the way it has been given, there's issues in the face of the law that should render the judge consider why this order needs to be revoked. So that's something that is currently going to be in court by end of day today.
What does such an order and an act do to this person's livelihood? Because you have taken the equipment that I use to earn a living.
Yes.
I'm out, I'm still have to continue earning my living, but everything that I used to earn my living is in police custody.
Yeah.
So does the law consider that?
And that's one of the grounds on why this order should actually be reviewed. Like, I keep insisting on something called the probable cause. For your rights to be infringed in such a way, there needs to be something which should be, in terms of evidence. The investigation office should have something very tangible to convince the court on why your rights need to be infringed at this particular moment. As it is, my clients, I have no idea even how they're making a living right now. They go to the office, they can just see cables. They don't have CPUs. How do they move? They don't have phones. Up to now, getting access of them, I have to go through several family members to get through somebody, and I have to wait for them until they get home.
To call.
Yeah, to call. So these are some of a few things, and that's a very weighty thing on why the application for review is very important at this particular time. Because if I let this go, I can guarantee you so many people will be in the same situation. Yeah.
And I wanted
precedence
to ask,
as well.
Yeah,
it
is.
That's a precedent. I just wanted to ask if there's any legal way that either civil society or the public can intervene without jeopardizing the case.
Of course, take for example, the application that I'm making is going to have several interested parties there. One of the few people that I'm going to involve as interested parties are institutions like the Kenyan National Human Rights. There's going to be Amnesty International. There's going to be the Media Council of Kenya. There's going to be several media houses. There's going to be BBC. Because this, as much as this is something which is very specific to a certain incident, ideally the people who are custodians, such as the Commission on Human Rights, they need to be aware that there is certain approach the state is taking such matters, and it's not in the interest of the public. The state organs and the investigative bodies, they're there to protect you and me. They're not there to enforce ideologies and government mandates, and to a certain extent, they're there to protect you. They're supposed to maintain law and order. Those are constitutional and independent offices. They're very separate from the executive, very separate from the parliament. So if we do not do something about this, what makes you think that tomorrow is not going to be you?
And members of the public as well. I know I mentioned civil society. Even members of the public can legally intervene without jeopardizing the case?
Yes, they can. Because at the end of the day, this is a public interest matter. So take, for example, I saw a tweet from Jerry a couple of weeks ago. And the tweet was in regards to, if they're targeting people who participated in the BBC documentary, there was thousands and thousands of Kenyans who participated on June 25th. Does it mean that every Kenyan who was on the street should avail themselves of the nearest police station to say that, you guys, it seems you're interested in Blood Parliament. I remember the camera caught me somewhere, so I'm here to avail myself.
Videos on my phone.
So ideally, if there is any Kenyan out there who's interested in ensuring that Article 49 should be looked at in more depth, they are free to file a petition in court, and they can enjoin as many people as they want.
That's good. There's a comment here, intrusive thought that I had, but it's been put down. Mwangi Gishimu says, the advocate seems not to be admitting another weak link or enabler. How did the court grant orders sought by police through the miscellaneous application?
This is something that I've been thinking a lot about it. So what happens is that when Justice Martha Koome became the Chief Justice, one of the things that she's been very adamant about is digitizing the court process. And we have this thing called the case tracking system. So if you go to court, there's the court orders that you're going to get. They're not only going to have a certain specific identifier, but also it's going to have the judge's name who granted the court orders, and also it's going to have a way you can track those orders. Now, when I look at these particular orders which are granted by the magistrate, one of the few things you'll realize here, this particular court order does not have a name. Okay?
given under my hand, under the seal of the court on this day. And then there it says magistrate, judge.
Yeah.
And there's just
a signature.
Just a signature.
Just a
no
signature.
name.
No name. This is a common practice in criminal courts. Okay. In civil courts, every court order has not only the signature, the seal of the court, but it also has the name of the judge. The only reason why I know the magistrate who signed this is because I could be able to trace the miscellaneous application through the CTS. Without that, I cannot be able to know which particular magistrate has signed this particular court orders. When we look at the form of orders, it comes under this form. But we also have to acknowledge that times have changed, and there's a certain practice whereby we need to tie the magistrate or the judge who grants such orders. But also, I find that sometimes the magistrates can be misled by the investigative bodies, because when they're making this particular application, they do not disclose the fact that they violated the rights of Article 50, right? This is the fact that you need to have a right to fair administrative justice, right? They do not get to disclose that they arrested these people without probable cause. And then the same thing, they did not specify the particulars on what is false. So when the magistrate is taking into account, they're like, this is something, and it has been framed in a way that it seems like it's a national security issue.
Yeah.
That's why those orders were granted. So our review application is going to not only get to vacate those issues, but at the end of the day, I want to hold the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, the Serious Crime Unit, to a higher standard, and we cannot let this go. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to ask a question. Something happened in the courts a couple of days ago, April 30th. The High Court awarded 11 protesters 2.2 million shillings, that's 200,000 shillings each, as compensation for violation of their rights by police during the anti-finance bill demonstrations last year. This is because the police who arrested these people were masked and hooded. And the judge, Justice Bahati Mwamuye, said, any officer deployed to ensure law and order shall not in any way hide or conceal their face so as to render them identifiable. Any officer deployed to ensure law and order. This includes arresting officers.
Yes.
Now, by concealing their face in any way, that's one way of masking themselves. But how about an officer who just comes and they don't identify themselves? They're in plain clothes and they don't identify themselves. Is that legal?
It's not legal. So the only leeway the courts have granted to security agencies are matters especially on terrorism and when they're investigating issues of national security. That's only when that even this particular investigative officers, they need to perhaps disguise themselves for purposes of them not being facing any for their own security. Okay, that's something that the courts are very cognizant about. So the reason why Justice Mwamuye even came with that particular decision is also because LSK at one particular point realized that officers were coming with those N5 masks. They're covering themselves, being hooded, they're not even wearing uniform and things like that. Faith Odemba went to court, obtained orders, and there were these orders which were granted. When my clients were being arrested, they were wearing face masks. Okay? That's the thing, they were not supposed to. On the video, my clients were asking this particular, can you ask your officers. Only one officer had removed their mask. The rest, they were still covered. My clients were asking, could you ask them to remove their masks? They stayed on for quite some time, all right? When in the same video, and I give credit to one particular officer, he really tried to be within the law to a certain extent, but he still did not meet the threshold.
I know what was happening there.
Yeah.
It's you've been given an assignment, you don't want to do it, but you're like, fine, I have my orders. Let me try to do them to the best of my ability and to the best standard possible, regardless of all the illegalities surrounding me, unfortunately.
I don't want to make things seem like a movie, but I think as Kenyans, we live in a situation where we're living in a fictional TV series, in a sense whereby, I kid you not, I think most Kenyans believe there's some certain agency or some people somewhere, they're acting under the guise of police powers, and they're connected to this type of thing, because that officer really struggled to the extent whereby he did identify himself. He's the only officer who identified himself. But also at the same time, when he was being put to question, why are you here? The guy started coming up with some reasons, I don't know from where, that we're here, you don't have a license. All these videos are in the purview of the court, and it's all, these are information which can be accessed by anybody. So that full clip, it's about several hours, but it just tells you that even the officers there, we might have some very good officers, but because there is a hierarchical aspect, they are following orders. But at the end of the day, when we go to court, I'm going to cite that officer.
Right.
And they're going to be responsible.
Right.
So it's to their detriment. It's not in their best interest to undertake this type of things.
No, you have to do it to the law. I know we're winding up, but you just talked about that we're in some kind of series, Black Mirror or something.
Yeah.
Rahim Tola Omar says that book, 1984 by George Orwell, is very relevant to the Kenyan situation. The Truman Show. Sometimes I'm just like, are we living in alternate realities?
Animal Farm. Even.
Animal Farm. We can go on and list them. But thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you.
Ian Mutiso, advocate of the High Court, representing the 4 filmmakers in court, and also has represented many others during the protest last year. And you continue doing what you're doing. You're a fixer.
Yep.
Thank you.
Asante.
Thank you so much.
Next up, Dr. Barbara Amonde, emergency response doctor, who will be coming to speak to us about the cholera outbreak in Kenya. There's an outbreak. Keep it here for that.